These Barbies are just having a good time, having fun watching SportsCenter with Jay and Dan. And believe me, whether you have Barbies or don't have Barbies, it's going to be a very entertaining show. We encourage you to watch either way. It's SportsCenter with Jay and Dan, brought to you by our friends at McDonald's. Thanks for tuning in as we continue to try to entertain you while you are isolating at home with your families or friends, or, well, really, you shouldn't isolate with your friends. Dan, you're isolating with your cat, I see.
Yeah, it's, again, it's tough to train a cat. This cat, not listen, that's Ron. We'll take care of that in a minute. Hey, we keep talking about the resumption of the NHL season. Not sure if that's going to happen, but they are putting plans in place. But what about next season? Is that going to have problems with it getting started on time, training camps, all that other stuff? Let's find out from James Duthie and the Insiders.
You know your insiders, Bob McKenzie, Darren Dreger, and Pierre LeBrun. Gentlemen, we would have been middle of round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs by now in a normal time. It's not normal, and instead we're in the middle of another round, or I guess an extension, dregs of self-isolation.
Yeah, that's the expectation, James, that the National Hockey League will extend its quarantine period. It expires on April 30th. It's likely that it would be extended into mid-May. Now, there is a call between the National Hockey League and the Players Association that's expected as early as tomorrow to go over some of the questions and the concerns. I know the Return to Play Committee of all NHL players also expected to virtually meet this week. Players in Europe need to know in the very near future, when are they coming back? How are they getting back? How is that travel process going to be managed? And is there going to be a 14-day self-isolation period required when those players get back to North America? Now, at any point, what happens if a player or a member of the personnel staff of the National Hockey League, anyone involved in the restart process, tests positive? What happens at that point? How will players see their families again when you get into phase 3 and phase 4 of the quarantine process? Is it reasonable to expect that the players be separated from their families for up to 3.5 months? And finally, James, perhaps the biggest of them all is a cost analysis that will happen between the NHL and the Players Association. What I mean by that is, with no fans in the building, you've got the travel costs, you've got the divisional city locational costs, hotels will be mammoth, all of that. And what about the extra precautionary medical measures? How much is that all going to cost? And when you weigh everything, is it worthwhile? I suppose it will be, but there's a lot of back and forth first that has to happen.
A ton still to be determined. I think we've all come to realize over the last few weeks that whatever happens with this season, the next season is also going to be affected in some way. What sort of plans have they come up with for next year, or at least are they kicking around, Pierre?
Yeah, James, listen, part of what the league has talked about as a possibility with its teams over the past little while is delaying the start of next season into December. That's right. We had thought November would be a delay. Well, December is now on the table as well. Nothing written in stone, of course, but teams being told that this is a possibility. And there's a couple of reasons. One is that the league doesn't know yet if or when it can resume this season and how long it's willing to go to end this season, i.e., you know, we've talked about July, August for the playoffs. What if it goes into September or October, which, by the way, is on the table? Number two, and I think to me the most important factor in why you would delay next season into a December start is fans in the building. There are a lot of teams that when next season comes, whenever that is, need fans in the building. It's a gate-driven league. It's one thing to finish the playoffs this year without fans, but they're going to need revenue next year. And when can you have fans? When will there be a vaccine? When is it safe? Tough to say, but that's why the league is willing to wait until next December. And by the way, here's the kicker. They'd like to have an 82-game season, even if it starts in December, which means playing into July next year.
Bob, lots of buzz about an early June draft. Anything new on that?
You know, James, we thought we might hear official word this week that they're doing it or they're not doing it. It's my understanding now that that final decision could drag into next week. And right now, we're still relatively pessimistic about getting a June draft, or certainly if you were looking at the NHL's optimism, pessimism needle, because there was such a negative reaction to the idea of doing a June draft, early June draft, before the league knows whether or not there's going to be anything to do with the 19 or 20 season, then they would need to figure all that out. But in any case, as I say, not likely to happen, but you never know, and final decision probably next week.
Well, the NFL draft showed that a virtual draft can work. Let's hope the NHL can follow suit. Insider trading from TSN Hockey.
The Hlinka Gretzky Cup International Under-18 tournament scheduled for August the 3rd to 8th in Edmonton and Red Deer, Alberta has been canceled. TSN's Frank Saravalli reports one reason for the cancellation, aside from COVID-19, of course, is that the Oilers wanted to preserve arena availability should the NHL return. The tourney is scheduled to be in the Czech Republic and Slovakia 2021 and then return to Alberta the following year.
Leafs defenseman Jake Muzzin broke his hand in late February. This came after signing a 4-year extension with the Buds. He joined Leafs Lunch and talked about the hand 2 months after suffering the injury.
The hand feels great. I'm ready to go. So it's, I mean, the time has, it's given me time to fully heal, and the strength is almost 100%. And so, I mean, that's kind of been a plus, if that is a plus. I mean, that I'm healthy to go. This has been a totally, a culture shock for a lot of guys, where it's like they're in limbo. There's no set date or direction, because we're waiting, patiently for this this corona, and I mean to go and make its course, and so it's kind of it's a weird time.
So Dan, we've been hearing so much talk about leagues around the world, not just North America, but leagues around the world, trying to encourage their fans by saying we want to return in June, we want to return in July, we want to return in August. And just last week, French major soccer league Ligue 1, where Paris Saint-Germain is, announced plans to try to return in June. Well, now that appears that those plans have been thrown out the window.
That's right. Big announcement on Tuesday out of France. Ron, the 2019-2020 soccer season in France, that's done, because it's canceled after the Prime Minister announced Tuesday that all sporting events will be banned until at least September. France is the first of the Big Five soccer leagues in Europe to cancel its season due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The government's decision comes less than a week after the French league announced potential plans to resume its season in June. Now, what ripple effect could this have on European soccer? With more, here's KJ.
The decision to cancel all major sporting events in France until at least September means today is a landmark day in the current status of the European football calendar. And as usual, during these unprecedented times, we still have a lot of questions that remain unanswered. But here is what we do know from a sporting point of view. We know the General Assembly of those leagues will meet in May to determine those sporting outcomes. Will Paris Saint-Germain win the title? They're currently 12 points clear. You would expect common sense would prevail there, and they would be given the crown. Who will be given the European Champions League and Europa League spots next season for the major competitions under the UEFA umbrella? Will there be promotion and relegation? We will find that out in May. And it's important to note here, as we continue to hear from more and more of these countries under government guidance, that those countries have a right to make those decisions. UEFA have asked that they get these things decided and make a decision whether they're returning back to the field by May the 25th. But UEFA are not telling these governing bodies within their own leagues what to do. It is up to them. So Liverpool still have a chance to win the Premier League, for example. Germany still hoping to get back as well. A lot of other countries, Spain, for example, have been very critical. Javier Tebas, the president, was very critical on Tuesday of the French decision to cancel these leagues. That is something we know. The other thing we don't truly know, and what is really important here, is that the UEFA Champions League and the Europa League, as of this season, the 2019-20, still have plans to finish those off by August. Now, that is really, really important to note, because PSG and Olympique Lyonnais, the two French teams, are still involved in that major competition at the last 16 stage. They can no longer play games at home, so that throws that competition up in the air as well as the following season. So as usual during these unprecedented times, a lot of things still to be unanswered, but as we look at going forward, more and more countries may take note of what France are doing here in cancelling all major sporting events until at least September.
Coming up on Sports In with Jay and Dan and Ron the Annoying Cat, we look ahead to the CFL Draft, which goes this week.
Sports Center with Jay and Dan, brought to you by McDonald's. It's the walkover, where we just stay where we are. Though, I'll tell you,
I'm just
a creature that's been doing a lot of walking.
Ron was about to do the walk anyway. Yeah.
Right, there you go. Ron is doing the walkover for us. And then you have another cat named Ginny. Where's Ginny, Dan?
Ginny doesn't like the spotlight. Ron does, and Ron seems to be getting his laps in during this show. So I think he's gone now. We're good. Hey, you know what? Nova Scotia, we're thinking of you guys after what's gone on in that province, and you need some good news. And you know what? Some good news for Nova Scotia might come out of this week's CFL Draft because of one player in particular. Here's Dwayne Ford.
It's expected that on Thursday, Isaac Adeyemi Berglund, the 6'1", 245-pound pass rusher, will become just the 6th Nova Scotian in the last 30 years to be selected in the first round of the CFL Draft.
Number 91 jumped out. He was a man.
After graduating from Dartmouth High School, it took a year of Cégep football in Quebec to land a scholarship to Southeastern Louisiana University. Then, even after a breakout 6-sack junior season that included an eye-opening performance against LSU and future Heisman winner and #1 overall NFL draft pick Joe Burrow, he still wasn't on the CFL's radar. In fact, he was so off the radar that his name wasn't even on the initial version of the 2020 CFL draft eligibility list, let alone appearing in the Fall Scouting Bureau rankings. Another 7.5 sacks as a senior, however, made him impossible to overlook. He earned the number 17 spot in the December prospect rankings, and by the time the spring edition was released a few weeks ago, he had climbed to number 12. It's a good bet that one of the draft's fastest rising prospects will go even higher on draft day.
Very cool to hear Dwayne Ford's voice. He's got, I believe he's a high school principal, Dan, Dwayne Ford. So, you know, he has that authoritarian voice that I love to hear. And you can see him and others on the CFL Draft. Our coverage begins Thursday on TSN 1, 3, and 5. Dan, a lot of fanfare about you and I returning to the television set. Just today, I was walking down the street and a guy said, "Hey, I like you guys." And that was all he said. And I thought that was pretty encouraging. But I will say this, Dan, Simon Haupt, who occasionally writes sports media stuff for the Globe and Mail, wrote a glowing article about your return and my return to television. And in that article, he referred to us as the Midnight Bros.
Yeah, we've never had a nickname, really, because it's always been Jay and Dan or Tall Guy in Stinky Pants. But Midnight Bros, that I can get into.
When it's the crack of midnight, when sports need to be reported, when crimes need to be solved, two bros combine forces to report sports and solve crimes at midnight. Midnight Bros. Starring David Hasselhoff as Jay Onrait, David Hasselhoff as Dan O'Toole, David Hasselhoff as the villainous Dr. Admiral Otto von Smooth, and producer Tim as crime-solving supercomputer Bros. Simon Haupt of the Globe and Mail says, "This is not what I meant when I said Midnight Bros." The TSN PR department exclaims, "We take no responsibility for this." And TSN's Mark Masters says, "I'll admit I'm a bit confused because sometimes they're solving a crime involving an international drug ring, and sometimes it's just them chasing a ghost for 43 minutes. And also there's sports news, but I gotta say this works for me big time. This spring, it's midnight. Do you know where your bros are? Midnight Bros."
I love it. I'm super pumped about this show. I think this is going to be huge for us. We know, Dan, that Crave is craving content because everybody's getting Crave right now because they have so many great shows, and this is just adding to their incredible roster.
I'm just surprised we got the Hoff because, I don't know if you know, but the Hoff, he's got a lot of cash in the bank. he made out pretty good on Baywatch.
Yeah. He wants to make a bit of a comeback, and he wanted something cool and hip and edgy, but those things were not available to him, so he went with us. Time now for Who Delivered, presented by Mick Delivery. On this day in 1998, friend of SportsCenter with Jay and Dan, Daniel Alfredson scored the first playoff hat trick in Senators history, part of a 4-3 win over the Devils. Ottawa was the 8th seed in the East. They'd go on to beat the Devils in 6. Alfie, like he always did, delivering big time.
You can see a Her Mark special Wednesday night on TSN at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. Kate Burness is joined by an impressive roster of some of the most famous names in Canadian sports, including Tessa Virtue.
I think I have found your biggest fan. I mean, there are a lot of them out there, but I think I found the ultimate in Vancouver. And her name is Grace. I know she has a poster of you on the wall. Her phone case is a picture of you. And I'm wondering if I can set up a Zoom phone call right now and you could meet her over Zoom. Is that possible?
I would love that. Yes, I would love that. Hi, Grace.
Hi, Grace.
Hi.
Hi, Grace. I'm Kate. I just wanted you to meet Tessa Virtue.
Oh, hi. It's so nice to meet you. It's so nice to meet you. Surprise. Oh my God.
That was very sweet, I have to say. Now, it's funny because that little girl, Grace, she had a cat. And Dan, your cat is a big part of our You Blew It segment because your cat was all over this show.
Yeah, Ron had to get his steps in. He wears a Fitbit Meow, so I think he achieved that just in this show alone.
A Fitbit Meow. Dan, so many other things. I called Dwayne Ford authoritarian. I mean authoritative. Tim said I called him a dictator. Also, my daughter was very, very loud off the top of the show. She was upstairs playing. And then I misspelled Ligue 1 because I can't really spell French words. I'm not sure why I tried. But other than that, Dan, I thought it was a pretty entertaining show.
Yeah, I think I'm tasked with teaching one of my children French this week. It's not going to go well because I remember comme ci, comme ça, bonjour, and oui. I think that's about it. Je m'appelle Dan. That's that as well.
All right. Okay, that's 4 things. That should get you by in general in some sort of summer job in Quebec. Either way, Dan, I think a lot of parents are having a hard time with the homeschooling thing. So go parents. You can get it done. I know you can do it. And keep watching our show. We're on every Tuesday to Saturday morning here on TSN. Bye.
And this show's informative. Just put this on. See ya.